Hey, I'm at Mount Rainier National Park, and behind me is Mount Rainier. This is America's 4th national park and one of the oldest national parks in the world, dating back to the 19th century. There's a lot of history at Mount Rainier. In addition to becoming our 4th national park in 1899, it was the first national park to allow automobiles in 1906, though they were kept to a speed limit of 6 miles per hour. During World War II, ski soldiers trained here. Mount Rainier is an active volcano, so obviously it's really famous for its geology, but there are also some important facts about its geography that tell us a little bit about the history of the environmental movement in America. Specifically, the fact that this was a popular visiting spot for John Muir, and just south of me is a place named for Gifford Pinchot. When John Muir saw Mount Rainier, he said it was awful in its bulk and majesty. It's a funny way to say he liked it. And John Muir, of course, would become very famous as a campaigner for the wild places of America. He would found the Sierra Club, and his philosophy was called preservation. The idea that things shouldn't be changed, they should be preserved the way that they are. And he preached it in his lifetime. He took Theodore Roosevelt hiking and preached the idea to Theodore Roosevelt, which would have an influence on Roosevelt's policies. He would found one of the world's first bird sanctuaries and more national parks. And today, Theodore Roosevelt is in fact very closely associated with the idea of preservation. Theodore Roosevelt National Park is in fact named in his honor. But despite John Muir's best efforts, it would be a different man who would have a greater impact on Roosevelt's thinking on nature. So as John Muir was preaching the idea of preservation, Gifford Pinchot was preaching an alternative idea called conservation. Now, Muir was an explorer, a philosopher, and a dreamer. Pinchot was an academic. He was more practical. He was a scientist. He had spent his early life in Europe studying a new idea called scientific forestry, and he wanted to bring that idea to America. And we would now just summarize it all to call it conservation, or as Pinchot said, the greatest use to the greatest number of people for the greatest amount of time. Pinchot saw the value of aesthetics and recreation. He didn't disbelieve in national parks, but he also thought that nature had to serve the economy first, that economic prosperity and progress would ultimately lead to the long-term protection of nature. And even though Muir felt, after hiking and befriending Theodore Roosevelt, that he'd convinced him, ultimately as president, Roosevelt made Pinchot one of his closest advisors. The national forests today carry on Pinchot's legacy with scientific, intelligent economic use, and most of America's laws are based on that concept to this day, at least concerning the environment. So ultimately, in the feud between Muir and Pinchot, Pinchot was the winner. And the national forest, called Gifford Pinchot National Forest, just south of me right now, is named in his honor. So even though Gifford Pinchot ultimately won that rivalry, though John Muir would continue to write letters and advocate for preservation for the rest of his life, Muir and Pinchot did maintain a friendship. They were friends. They spent time together. It's fair to say that they were both friends of friends through their mutual acquaintance, Theodore Roosevelt, but their rivalry, though intense, was never bitter.